Kia ora everybody, good afternoon. Today I'm joined by the Finance Minister, Grant Robertson, more on that in a moment. Cabinet met this afternoon to discuss the ongoing response to Cyclone Gabrielle. But first, a quick recap of the latest information that we have to hand. Tragically, 11 individuals have lost their lives, and our thoughts remain with their families, friends and communities who are grieving loved ones in such a difficult time. 6,517 people are still unaccounted for, but we know that 4,260 are okay, and police are continuing to work to urgently reconcile the others. Approximately 15,000 customers are still without power across the North Island. The bulk of those are now concentrated in Napier and Hastings. We've managed to get around 70% of Napier reconnected, and work continues to prioritise reconnecting the rest. Council supplied drinking water in Hastings and Napier is safe. Water supply is operating safely in Wairoa, but a boil water notice remains in place there. In Gisborne, the main water treatment plant is now operating, however there are still water restrictions in place. In Northland, there are no boil water notices in place and the water is safe. Where power supply to pumps remain an issue, the regional and local councils are supplying bottled water or installing large water tanks where those are required. Fibre connections have been restored to all of the affected areas and are running at pre-cyclone capacity where the mains power is on. Cell tower coverage is at around 95% across the affected areas. Some are on generator power and therefore capable of voice and text communication only. As power comes back on, those towers will be able to be supported by fibre to provide data connections. NEMA have deployed so far 60 Starlinks into the Hawke's Bay and the Tairāwhiti regions. 30 more are in transit to Gisborne today to help plug gaps. The Defence Force has more than 950 personnel involved in the response efforts, and they continue to support local civil defence and emergency management groups in Tairāwhiti and the Hawke's Bay with multiple activities. The HMNZS Canterbury departs Lyttelton this evening, and it's expected to arrive in Napier tomorrow with further supplies including Bailey bridges, generators, gas bottles and emergency packs. Last week we declared a national state of emergency for only the third time in our history. While some areas are further advanced in their emergency response and are starting to look towards recovery, others are still very much in the emergency response phase. Today, Cabinet agreed that the Minister for Emergency Management will extend the national state of emergency for a further 7 days. This allows us to continue coordinating the response at a national level, ensuring those areas receive the resources that they require. The declaration continues to apply to 7 regions: Northland, Auckland, Tairāwhiti, Bay of Plenty, Waikato, Hawke's Bay and Tararua. Extending the national state of emergency for all the areas presently covered allows us to transition those areas together into the recovery phase, meaning that they'll get all of the support on offer from a nationally supported recovery. Recovering from Cyclone Gabrielle will be one of the major areas of focus for the government in the coming weeks and months. We're committed to working in partnership with business and the community while we do this. Our overall approach to a recovery will be informed by lessons learned from past responses to events such as the Christchurch and Kaikoura earthquakes. We need strong and experienced coordination across all arms of government, working alongside local government, the business community, social service providers, iwi and community groups. We're committed to a strong local voice informing recovery priorities and decisions. At a local level, a lead minister will be appointed for each of the affected regions, and I'll finalise a list of lead ministers tonight, and I'll be tasking them with reporting back, working with their communities within a week on the local recovery approach that's best going to meet the needs of their regions. To ensure the government is guided closely by the advice and needs of those affected on the ground, we will be establishing a new Cyclone Recovery Task Force to ensure those local voices have direct input into decision making. The task force will be headed by Sir Brian Roche and will be structured similarly to that of Australia's Queensland Task Force that was established following their floods, including regional groups It's important that this recovery effort is led by the needs of those on the ground. Further information, including the membership and the terms of reference for the task force, will be available in the coming days. A new Cabinet Committee will be established to take decisions relevant to the recovery, and it will include each of the ministers leading the regional efforts. Grant Robertson will chair the Cabinet Committee and will also take on the newly created role of Cyclone Recovery Minister. I also intend to appoint Barbara Edmonds to support him as an Associate Minister in that new portfolio. Grant's experience in managing New Zealand's finance through times of economic disruption place him in a strong position to take on this new role. While the full impacts of the cyclone continue to be assessed, it's clear that the damage is significant and on a scale not seen in New Zealand for at least a generation. The required investment to reconnect our communities and future-proof our nation's infrastructure is going to be significant, and it will require hard decisions and a whole-of-government approach. We won't shy away from those hard decisions, and we're working on a suite of measures to support New Zealanders by building back better, building back safer, and building back smarter. Today, Cabinet agreed an initial support package to re-establish critical transport infrastructure and support businesses while we assess the full extent of the impact of the cyclone. Shortly, I'll hand over to the Minister of Finance and the incoming Cyclone Recovery Minister to run through the details of that package. But first, to the week ahead. Tomorrow, the House will resume, and I will be giving the Prime Minister's statement, setting out the direction and priorities for the government this year. Tomorrow evening, I'll also be speaking with the NATO Secretary-General regarding our ongoing support for Ukraine. On Wednesday, I'll be in Wellington undertaking a range of meetings and attending the first question time of the year. I'll also have an introductory call with the Prime Minister of the Netherlands, Mark Rutte. On Thursday, Deputy Prime Minister Carmel Sepuloni will travel in my place to represent New Zealand at the Pacific Islands Forum in Fiji. I'll be remaining in New Zealand and looking to travel to cyclone-affected regions. On Saturday, I'll be in Auckland, visiting those affected in Muriwai and attending the 2023 National Kapahaka Festival to Matatini. Grant.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Before I begin, I do want to acknowledge the enormous impact of this disaster. Spending time as I did yesterday in the Hawke's Bay area, I saw this firsthand, and I know that it is replicated across other regions. There is a big journey ahead to respond, recover and rebuild, and I want all of those in affected regions to know that we will be with you on that journey. As the Prime Minister has said, the investment into this response and the recovery and rebuild that follows will be significant. We have already put tens of millions of dollars into immediate emergency responses, including civil defence payments, mayoral relief funds, voluntary and business sector support. Plus, of course, the countless hours of work by public servants and also the New Zealand Defence Force on the ground. In that context, Cabinet has agreed today a further support package, which, as the Prime Minister has said, is in two parts. One to re-establish critical transport infrastructure and the other to support businesses. I want to be very clear, this is an interim package and more support will follow as we get a better picture of the scale, cost and needs in the wake of this disaster. I would note that in responding to previous major disasters, a rolling maul approach has had to be taken, and this situation is no different. So to today's decisions. Cabinet has agreed to a $50 million fund to get immediate support to businesses, workers and the primary sector. The fund will provide a range of support depending on need, but it is expected to include discretionary funding for flood recovery, business continuity support, resilience advice and mental wellbeing support. Ministers will finalise the allocation of this fund in the coming week, and we will do that in cooperation with local business associations, iwi and local government. Cabinet has also agreed today to extend a range of tax relief measures to cyclone-affected regions, including interest write-offs and filing date waivers. The temporary exemption made to the Credit Contracts and Consumer Finance Act has now also been extended to include Gisborne, Hawke's Bay and Tararua, allowing banks and other lenders to quickly lend money to affected consumers. The exemption provides a streamlined process for temporary credit up to $10,000. And also to remind the announcement made at the weekend of the New Zealand Claims Resolution Service, which has opened nationwide today, particularly to support homeowners with their insurance claims. This is a lesson taken from the Canterbury recovery. Cabinet has also heard today from the Minister of Immigration on the work that he's undertaking to ensure that skilled workers are able to come from overseas and work in the affected regions, and also to ensure the well-being of and ongoing work for regional seasonal employees. And the Minister of Immigration will progress that work and make comments in the near future. In terms of transport, the damage to highways and local roads in these two recent weather events has been massive. About 400 kilometres of our state highways are being worked on urgently through Tairāwhiti, Hawke's Bay and the Central North Island in order to reopen safely. Cabinet agreed today an initial contribution of $250 million to top up the National Land Transports Fund emergency works budget. This funding will be available for both local roads and state highways. Our primary focus is, of course, on getting lifeline roads open and reconnecting isolated communities. We also want to ensure that supply chains are open to get goods to market. The devastation that has seen some growers lose all of their crops sits alongside other producers who are actually anxious to get their goods to market. Transport links are essential to be able to do this. We have a large job ahead to determine which state and local roads can be rebuilt and which cannot, or perhaps should not, be replaced. This medium and long-term work will take time and it will require additional funding over and above that announced today. But for today, our focus is on making sure we do the emergency and remedial work that is necessary to rebuild our transport network. As I've said, we have a long job ahead of us to rebuild after this disaster, but we have the resources to do it and we have the will to do it. Rest assured, we will support New Zealanders through this, as we have through all the other disasters that we have faced as a country. Prime Minister.
Thank you. Jessica.